I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to an all-new Better Podcasting live chat. I am Stephen John Drew, and with me, of course, is Stargate Pioneer.
You know, for the video watchers, viewers, they're noticing the juxtaposition between you and me because you're the Canadian. You're the one that lives in the tundra in an igloo. And
Yes.
yet I got 4 measly inches of snow here and I'm all bundled up in my geeky jersey, just kind of cold in the podcast room.
No, not here. Not here. You know, it's cooler for our weather, but I'm in a polo t-shirt for the audio listener. And Stargate Pioneer, you should see his ugly Christmas sweater he's got on right now.
It's not a Christmas sweater. It's a geeky jersey. It's Flynn's Arcade, man, from Tron. You're messing up my zen, man.
If you're checking out the show for the first time this time, thank you. Thanks for checking us out. And this is our companion to the Better Podcasting main show. Both of these, though, can be found over at betterpodcasting.com. And like Mr. Pioneer mentioned there, or Mr. P, because he always says, call me SP.
Call me SP.
So as SP said, we have a video companion. So if you want to see our ugly mugs, go ahead and check them out. And you can do that at betterpodcasting.com. And this is where we kind of fly by the seat of our pants and we talk a little bit about some of the latest happenings in our podcasting world, the other people's podcasting world that submits ideas to us, as well as just general podcasting things that have come up. And I want to kick us off with a recent discourse in our Discord about last week's Better Podcasting main show. This is something that I think we should talk about right now. So
what episode was it? It was 239,
episode
right?
239. Today we were recording this on Tuesday, December 1st. If you didn't know that, that's when we live stream this show, and the Better Podcasting main show is on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And so this dropped 2 days ago, the Better Podcasting 239 episode, and we had somebody come in, and it was Randy Walker, and said, why does SP sound so different in this episode? That's more or less what he said. And here's the thing with that. SP, as he was previewing it, also noticed something that was different. And so I was out when this message came in and was trying to figure out what was going on. And I thought to myself, okay, there's a couple possibilities of what could have happened with this episode. Because what happens is, because we have this video companion to this show, I go and I save the video version and I save the MP3. And I always preview the video version to make sure I haven't screwed something up and left like a logo over top, in the wrong spot, or cut out the video, right? So I always, when I'm previewing it, and I'm previewing it on 1.5 to 2 times speed, I go and I play the video version while I'm there. So I thought to myself, well, it could possibly have been something with the MP3 export, because when I went to do the MP3 from Magic's Vegas Movie Studio, it hung and it crashed, and I deleted a bunch of temporary files and I did a whole bunch of things and I couldn't get it to work. So sometimes this has happened, and occasionally, where something goes wrong with the individual project file, and from there, exporting is just not going to happen. You've basically broken the file at that point. And at that point, I went, okay, I've got the MP4 here that I've already done. So let's go ahead and turn that into an audio. So I went and I created a new session in Magic's Vegas Movie Studio, and I ended up saving the MP3 at that point. So we basically did an MP4 to MP3 conversion. Well, I've complained about this before. For some stupid reason, Magic's Vegas Movie Studio, by default, on an audio track, it adds some compression and some EQ, just some very basic things on there. Like, that's default on any track in there. So I thought maybe I left that in there. I usually go in and remove that if I've done this, because I've done this sort of thing before where I've used the MP4 to export. And I couldn't verify this because I just did it as sort of like a throwaway file. I did the conversion and then I closed the session, and it didn't save that conversion session file. And then I thought, well, maybe because of that problem, potentially, I apply some equalization and some cleanup on our tracks and to make it all level and things like that. Maybe one of those plugins didn't work in the export because the project file is clearly corrupt now. Maybe it didn't apply one of those on SP's track. So today I went through and behind the scenes, and if you go to our Discord server, there'll be some links in there if you want to check them out. I went and I did a comparison, and I did a bunch of different things. I redid the MP4 conversion, and I rebuilt the project file. So basically, I went in and I started from fresh, a new Vegas Movie Studio file. I copied and pasted all of the stuff, and then went in and manually added on all of the effects again and things like that, just to make sure it was complete. And then I cross-referenced it from something like a month ago to make sure that I hadn't screwed something up in the settings, and it all matched. And so I sent this to SP offline, and we did a little bit of a check. And neither of us could really hear the difference between any of the clips, the posted version, the re-render, so to speak, of the MP3. And I also threw in something from last week. I tried to find similar clips from the previous episode, 238, to put in there. And they kind of all sounded similar. So we got to do a little bit of a comparison. And in our Discord server, I'm going to submit the re-completed version where I rebuilt the file so everybody can listen to the whole thing and hear if they hear anything different. And at this point, if there's a difference, we don't know specifically what it is. SP's had some hardware things that he's changed his inputs, potentially that. Could just be, there was some other external factor that was causing it to sound different. Like, I don't know, maybe more reverb or something like that. I don't know. We don't really know what the difference could be. Like maybe all of his room echoed differently that day. I don't know. I really don't know what the difference would have been, because at the moment we're not really hearing, when we compare to previous things, we're not really hearing much different. But SP heard a difference when he played it. Randy Walker said it. Nobody else said anything. And we have one other theory, and this is where I'm getting to at the end of this. I used Stargate Pioneer's Gonna Geek pre-roll at the very beginning. Those pre-rolls, when I designed them, I specifically designed them to be heavily, I guess I'll call it modulated, because I wanted them to sound a certain way with everybody. So there's a lot of compression on there. There's very specific EQ on there. And I've even got a couple plugins with, because the network, not everybody had consistent noise removal. So there's some deverb on there as well. There's, I forget what it's called, but it's basically one of the plugins I have is quote for voiceover sort of thing. So it adds all sorts of effects that I personally wouldn't want on my podcast, but I want it on the pre-roll. And we're thinking maybe it was a placebo effect, that because we had that pre-roll of SP and immediately after him speaking with the other stuff, maybe it was that contrast that caused it. We don't know. We don't know what it is. We're hoping, because again, we're recording this like 2 days after it was released. We're hoping that eventually we'll get somewhere with a bunch of different ears on it, but it may have been a placebo effect. So I wanted to mention that right now and sort of lay it all out. I think it's a fun story that we can kind of delve into there and see where it lands at the end of it.
We'll have to see. I listened to it several times. I listened to the one that I downloaded, which was the first one that everybody has gotten into their feeds. And I definitely noticed a difference in between the pre-roll and what we call the cold opening. And that's what set me aside and like, wow. But it did sound extra reverby to me, and it sounded a little bit thinner. So we'll see if it's how I've got my gear dialed in and I just didn't notice it in between the pre-roll and what we were looking at. I have no idea if it's hardware. I have no idea if it's software or the rendering, although I did listen to the raw recording, which seemed fine to me. So I don't know. Betsy in the chat says that she noticed it when she was listening to the latest episode in the car today. And she says, it's amazing how you pick things up when you power listen. to the back catalog. So Betsy's been doing a lot of listening to our episodes. Thank you, Betsy.
And that's why I'm going to go, and I'm not going to do the replacement right now. The majority of our core listenership will have already gotten the new file. I'll come back to that, and I'm just going to go and I'm going to, in our Discord, put some other ears on it. I'll put the project file where I've recreated the project file from scratch, compare the effects to from weeks ago. I'll give that in our Discord server so that everybody can take a look and compare to what is posted, and then get more ears on there and sort of have other people compare and contrast. Because if we don't hear any difference whatsoever between the posted version as it is now and the one where I rebuilt, and I've verified the processing is exactly as it was a month ago, then that indicates there was another factor that wasn't in the editing, and we got to figure it out. So, you know, and I look forward to having everybody else's ears on there, because, you know, when I sent these to SP, I admitted maybe I'm too close, and to a degree, SP could be too close. So I look forward to everybody else and someone who doesn't listen to us all the time.
Or maybe they do listen to us all the time, so they could tell the intricacies of everything. We did get a question in the chat to lead everything off, and it was from Betsy, and she said, "Hi, I'm going to multitask tonight," which is not my forte. I'll tell you, Betsy, it's not my forte either. But if you're going to multitask at least one of the things listening to Better Podcasting Live Chat, it's a good decision. So I'm going over a logo artwork that a college student sent me and refining an episode list. I'll be listening in. My question is, do I sign up for my podcast media host now or wait until I have an episode ready? Thanks. Well, Stephen, let's just get this out of the way. You're more of the self-hosting guy. I mean, you have used Libsyn because we use it on the main show. You have used Pinecast. So you have used MediaHost, but you're the more self-hosting guy between the two of us.
I am.
Okay. So I'm going to use a podcast media host because it's easier guy here. And because of that, I'll go ahead and take lead on this question, unless, Stephen, you have something you want to say.
I'm sure I'll agree with you at the end, so go ahead.
I doubt that. Whenever we talk about media hosts, it's always a back and forth between us. So anyway, what I would say is that, yes, you could crack the whip open and get your podcast, select your podcast media host and start your account now, but it's going to be meaningless until you actually put an episode in there. So I would say I would save your money and I would just wait until your episode 1 is ready, and then, or trailer or whatever you're going to put out there. As soon as you need an RSS feed, then I would get your podcast media host, if that is where you're going to get your RSS feed from. And it is simply a money saving thing, because I don't know of any deals out there where if you don't move today, you're going to be locked into a lower rate forever. Like, I have a Pinecast account, even though I don't have a show on there yet. One's coming, but I don't have one on there yet because I wanted to be grandfathered into the $5 a month plan. It's $10 a month now, I believe. But I wanted to be grandfathered in there because I know it's going to be a long-term thing and I'm going to be paying this money for a long time. So I just wanted to make sure that I got in at the lower price, but I don't know of any other deal out there right now that's like that. So I would just wait until you're ready. That's my input, at least. Stephen, you just going to agree with me here, or are you going to?
I agree. No, okay. I do agree because of the fact that what you said, I don't know any huge deals that are run. Like, even for Black Friday deals and things like that, there usually are, here's your first month free. Well, that first month free is often readily available at other times as well, because they're trying to get your foot in the door. So why would you waste that free month on nothing? The only reason is if you have a target in mind and you're like, and for sure, because there's lots of people who have great ambitions, myself included. There's several times I had great ambitions of launching a new podcast in 2 months, and 2 months came and went. But if you know for sure you're going to launch soon, I think there's benefit to signing up ahead of time to get familiar with the process of using the interface and things like that. I think it's a lot to get your episode recorded, edited, together, and ready for release, in addition to learning your media host. So in that regard, like if you know that it's a month out, I think it might benefit you to a couple weeks before start getting in there. But again, if you know for sure you're going to launch on a certain day.
The other reason that I would go ahead and grab it as soon as you could is if you were worried about copyright, or if you're worried about having the domain name in your registrar or in your media host. If there was another podcast with the same name, like if there was another Better Podcasting out there in Libsyn, because that's where our main host is, then I would have wanted to get there first.
That's true.
So that we could have it in the RSS feed. Now, it's an RSS feed. Nobody's really going to see it. But if I could shorten it to the RSS feed to just Better Podcasting instead of like Better Podcasting Podcast or whatever we'd have to make, or Better Pod, whatever we'd have to make the RSS feed, then I would want to go ahead right away and do it. But if your name is not that searched, then I wouldn't worry about it. Although we'll talk about podcast statistics in a little bit. 2020 has been a banner year for podcasts. I mean, in every sense of the word. And if you're worried about somebody else having your name in your media host that you selected, then I would worry about it. But again, nobody's going to see the RSS.
And as a hobby podcaster, I think it's worth considering whether you think you are close to launching or not. Because again, it's a lot of money to sit there and spend $10 to $20 a month if you're not launching for a year. That's a lot. SP and I are people who probably have registered too many domain names. Well, here's the thing. Domain names often come with a promo where they cost you a couple bucks on the onset, right? They're a lot less expensive than a recurring monthly fee. And there's been many times we've dumped those after a year. We won't say the names on here, but there's lots that him and I both have. And if that was a monthly fee, that would have added up very, very quickly. So I would be cautious of that. If you don't know and you're thinking you're maybe a year or more away, I don't know. Is it worth registering just to hold that? I don't know. I might register the domain because of what I said. It's usually a lot cheaper and it's an annual fee. I would probably do that to at least get your foot in the door on that.
Plus, people will see the domain name, or you will say the domain name. You will never say your RSS feed name, the URL behind it. You just won't. So it'll go, you'll copy and paste it into different things, but for the most part, people aren't going to remember your RSS feed by the name. Liberty Dude had another question in there. He asks, what do you think about uploading a test episode before launch to be taken down before launch? I have some ideas here, but Steven, you want to start with this one?
Again, I think if you've never done a podcast before, I think that you should familiarize yourself with that. And if you're not submitting it to anywhere, I think you should do a test to go through the motion. If you are going to submit it to somewhere, I personally don't think you should, because all sorts of things suck those down. And I would probably just make it, if you were going to do a test and you haven't submitted it to anywhere and your media host for sure doesn't automatically submit to places, I would do a quick test, and it should be a simple file. Hey, I'm just giving this a test. If you're checking this out, come back soon. The full podcast will launch. And I wouldn't do a full episode to launch in there, because again, that gives the impression that you're gone. I would personally make it a very clear this is a test, and go through the motions. And once you've gone through the motions, I would pull it down very quickly. I think if you're going to go and do a test episode, I think you should do your episode 1. Like a true episode. If you're going to actually go as far as to put it up there. Behind the scenes test, whole other thing. If you're going to put it all out on the internet, I say do your episode 1 when you do that.
A couple of thoughts here. If you go with a media host like Libsyn, has this capability. I don't know if other places have this capability or not, but Libsyn has the capability to choose where you are submitting it to, where you're submitting the episode to, or where you're not submitting the episode to. So if you only want it to go into your RSS feed or not, you can put it in your feed basically, and then you can play with things there. and not have it available to be, as Stephen was saying, to go to the different places, even if you've already submitted it to there. So that's another way to look at it. So Stephen's saying if you haven't submitted your RSS feed to anywhere and you're sure that your media host isn't automatically submitting your stuff, then you can go ahead and put it in your feed so you can take it down later. I'm saying if you don't actually submit it to be published to any of those feeds or any of those destinations or whatever your podcast media host calls it, then you can do that. So that's one way. Another thing that I'm going to say is if you use Pinecast or Captivate or Transistor or Buzzsprout, those media hosts, I believe, all allow multiple RSS feeds from the same account. So if you have one of those podcast media hosts there, I would make up a fictitious RSS feed or a test RSS feed just so you get everything down so you can see if your media host is going to submit it anywhere or whatever, and you could get the process down that way. I'm a little bit unclear here is what Liberty Dude is asking, if he's asking for if you think it's a good idea to have a trailer out there before you start your actual episodes that you would take down later, or if it's just a test. So if it's a trailer, I would put it on your actual RSS feed and I would feel comfortable taking it down later, but just know that once it's out in the internet, it could possibly be out there forever. Now, I say that, and then there's a lot of podcasts that have been lost over the years because they haven't been assimilated by anywhere. But I would just assume if it's out in the internet, it's possibly out in the internet and could come back to haunt you in the future if you're worried about that sort of thing. But I haven't seen that in podcasting in a long time.
And Betsy also brings up the idea of an episode 0. Definitely that could be something that you use for that mechanical test as well. If you want to find out more about ideas behind episode 0, go to betterpodcasting.com/183. That will take you to episode 183 and of Better Podcasting. And we talked all about the concept of episode 0s.
Bangs Naughty Bits asked a question in the chat. Does Google still add feeds from the search? Good question. To my knowledge, I think Google only adds the feeds or the ones that have the tag in the website.
I don't know.
My understanding.
I don't know. I'm not sure that it ever evolved past where we first discovered it. I think there's issues when you don't have the code in there, but I think they still are indexing random feeds. And I don't know for sure, but I know back when we discovered that a long time ago, it was happening across the board that they're indexing. So okay. I'm not sure. But hey, that's a whole other conversation. Now let's talk briefly here about a thing that happened a couple weeks ago in our live chat. And we'll bounce all over the place here because I want to mention this. This was something we didn't get a chance to talk about last live chat. This was way back in episode 20 of the Better Podcasting live chat. I say way back. And we were going to talk about it in 21, but we had lots of great questions and those were better. So if you went and you listened to Better Podcasting 20 live chat, well, was it live chat? Might have been the Better Podcasting main show, come to think.
No, it was live chat. I remember because you had to edit it and we were talking about the editing thing. I remember. I've listened to it again.
That's true. It was live chat number 20. There was a little dance that SP did about a certain, he read an email that from some spam and we ridiculed it and said how spam is terrible and personally, for us, makes us think lowly about your podcast if you're going to go blanket spam to things that are irrelevant and when it's obviously blanket spam. But when I went in there, what did I do, SP? What happened when I actually posted the show?
You had edited, you had cut it, and you had used the Better Podcasting dunt when I said certain things or certain paragraphs were just shortened to dunt. And you know, as I was reading it, I cringed because I was like, I don't really want to be doing this, but I've already opened the can of worms. Let's just continue going down the place. And afterwards, Stephen and I were talking about it, and he said, well, I might edit it. We'll see how I feel. And I'm glad he edited it because I don't think that spammer should have been given any additional promotion to our audience than he got from, it was a he, right? Yeah. Than he got from us just talking about it on the live show. So if you got the live show there, you got a Better Podcasting live chat classic.
Yeah.
That won't be available anywhere. And I doubt I'll make that mistake again, where I'm talking about specifics on somebody that we don't want to promote anymore. Basically, it's not that we don't want to call the person out, is we don't want to promote the person because of the fact of the spammy sort of stuff in the email. They didn't even know who we were. They were just going through a list of emails that were attached to RSS feeds, basically, is what I could figure. Maybe they cracked the Apple API and they were harvesting them from there or something. I don't know. But that's what happened. Also, I was scratching my head over why I believe it was sent to me and not our podcast email, but that has been changed. So it shouldn't happen again.
And I want to clarify, by the way, I did not remove paragraphs. I removed only names and production companies, like anything that could have been Googled more or less. I removed. And I just specifically, I wanted to keep the rest of the email, but like SB said, I didn't want to give them the attention. So, it would have been effective marketing in some capacity if I didn't censor it. Was the way I looked at it. And, I think it's worth acknowledging this show here, we do say, we market it as a unedited, mostly program. That's what it is. It's very rare that I go in and edit the show. That was obviously an example of where I do. And because of that, I took the approach that I did. Now, because that was sort of unplanned, and as SP said, he was thinking about it as he went, like, do I want to do this? If it was the Better Podcasting main show, now that I remember this, we would have likely...
Oh, we would have just stopped.
Taken it out. Maybe he would have gone and redone it, or he would have
I would have
self-censored, right?
Yeah, I would have stopped in the middle and I would have said, Steven, we need to reset. I don't want to read this whole thing. And is what I would have said.
And I think it is worth considering that, if you go through and you do something and as you're editing it or you're thinking about it after, you're like, I really don't want that in. It's okay to take it out. But we had a point. We treat the show as mostly unedited. And so that's why I took that approach. And it was really fun. I like to find the opportunity to use the Better Podcasting 2 beats.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So we got about 15 minutes left here tonight, and I've got a couple of points. Steven, you have a point, but before we get to any of that, I want to ask our chat room a question. It is Tuesday following American Thanksgiving, which was Black Friday following that, and then Cyber Monday. So I just want to ask our chat room, we could talk about it as we go along, but did you get anything podcast related for yourself or for another podcaster on Black Friday or Cyber Monday, or, shopping online during the deals here? So if you have, please let us know what you got and why you got it, and maybe the price if you're willing to say that, and what kind of sale deal you got. And we will just talk about that as we go. Now, one thing that I wanted to say was about Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout has been, for a long time, if you're a longtime listener of Better Podcasting, the main show, I've referenced the statistics that Libsyn has given out. And of all the podcasts hosts out there, Libsyn was always statistically relevant just because of the amount of shows that they have. Well, Buzzsprout came out with some statistics of their own, which we'll go into a second. But the question was, are they statistically relevant? Like, how many shows do they have about all the total shows out there? And listennotes.com has a podcast stats page that they actually talk about how many podcasts are out there, the new podcasts by year. And like I said, 2020 has just been a banner year with 800,000 new podcasts. And before that, the biggest year was 2019, and that wasn't even 400,000 new podcasts. But of note, they run down how many podcasts are out there per RSS hosting domains, and Buzzsprout is up there at 79,926 podcasts. Libsyn is right underneath there at 77,709. So just by saying 70,000 is statistically relevant, or 80,000 is statistically relevant, Buzzsprout, just like Libsyn, is statistically relevant. So Buzzsprout has been showing these statistics on their website of how many downloads per podcast app is out there, per devices, per device types, and episode downloads for 7 days, that sort of thing. What's the average? And if you click right underneath the title, it says Buzzsprout Platform Stats, and I'll put the link in the chat and we'll put it in the show notes. But if you click on that, that is the month. And right now they have October 2020 and November 2020. So I'm just going to click on October 2020. So in October 2020, Apple Podcasts was only 47% of all of Buzzsprout downloads. Spotify was number 2 at 24.4%. Now, Apple also has other percentages, like Apple iTunes, they call it out separately, is 1.4%. And I don't think there's any other. So it's really more than 47%. It's like 48.4% just between those two. If I click on the October 2020 and I go to November 2020, and November 2020 is over. So I'm pretty sure that these stats are real time. So they're only for the 30 days of the month. Apple Podcasts. Now, remember what it was in October. It was 47%, right? Apple Podcasts, 32.3%. Wow. That is a severe change from just a couple of years ago when Libsyn was talking about the stats of all Apple downloads being on the order of 70%. That's less than half. And even if you put in the 1.5% of Apple iTunes on top of that, that is 33.8%. Apple Podcasts is no longer the gigantic club in podcasting. Now, they're still big. They're still number one, but they're not like number one and nobody else is going to catch me. Spotify is a close number 2 at 25.5%. Steven, did you take a look at these stats?
I took a quick surface view and I was not following. Are these for sure active?
Yeah, it actually says active podcasts in November 2020, active podcasts, 84,646. If you go to October of 2020, active podcasts is 82,574.
Oh, so that's interesting. Well then, I'm glad to see that Apple's perch or falling off of its perch. I like that. Makes me feel good.
You might. I thought you might. Absolutely. So it's just interesting. I don't know what the Libsyn numbers are. I haven't listened to the feed in quite some time, so I wouldn't be able to tell you what those numbers are off the top of my head. But like I said, it used to be 70%, and I knew it was falling. But I'd be interested to see the correlation on Libsyn's numbers here to see what the percentage of Apple is for them. But I was kind of discounting Buzzsprout's numbers until I saw the total number of podcasts and active podcasts that they were touting. 80,000. That's the same that Libsyn has. So
that's awesome. That's great. And as I've said before, I like competition. I think competition is good and it helps the consumer. Speaking of hosts and things like that, you might have seen this past weekend that there was maybe an outage with a host that you were using or trying to check out, or a bunch of different websites and the internet, because there was yet another Amazon Web Service outage, wasn't there, SP?
There was. So Amazon Web Services had an outage, which took out some of the podcasters out there, Anchor, RSS Podcasting, and WNYC, among others. This is just to say what we've been touting since first episode, really, is have your backups ready to go. And part of your backups is your RSS feed. So I know we talked about that in episode 65, which we compared the self-hosting and the RSS feed, self-hosting, the media hosts, the media for podcasting, and media hosts. Having a good solid media host that will back it up, or yourself if you're doing it, and make sure you have everything backed up, ready to go. That can enable downloads where people wouldn't have downloaded before. Now, we don't monetize, but if I was monetizing and I missed out on downloads that would actually count for making money in the CPM, the cost per thousand of downloads out there, I would want to get as many downloads as possible. And even a day's outage, even an hour's outage could mean money. So I would make sure that I would have a backup there. I would make sure that I had a backup anyway. So I'm not going to fault these places for not having a backup, because Amazon Web Services has actually been rock solid for quite some time. Matter of fact, we talked about how Podbean transitioned to Amazon Web Services a few years ago, and they were having problems until they did. So it's not just going to be podcasting that's affected. Amazon Web Services, they host a lot of web traffic over there that's not podcast related. But just to tell you that this sort of stuff does happen.
I'll go as far as to say that I agree you should have backups and things like that. But as far as this outage goes, I will go as far as to say it should be a non-consideration if your host was affected, because Amazon Web Service is, you hear a lot of people make the case against people using Amazon Web Service for their own hosting and things like that, because that is different than companies that are using Amazon Web Service. Because here's the bottom line, is Amazon Web Service is a massive thing within the internet. In fact, if I remember correctly, even the Amazon Voice Assistant, that I won't mention the name, so setting off a bunch of devices, had outages in some places because of this. This was a massive thing because Amazon Web Service is that big, and if they have an outage, and there are big outages in different parts of huge infrastructures that serve a whole bunch of like different hostings and are essentially the backbones of all sorts of different websites. So I will say that as far as this outage goes, there was a lot of different websites and players and companies involved with this. If your web host was one of it, if someone wants to try to say, well, that's why you shouldn't host on that person, I will call BS on that, because this was a massive thing. And Amazon Web Service is not a bad thing by any means, because there are many, many big corporations and big websites that use Amazon Web Service.
Yeah, so Bang's Nutty Bits, by the way, just to get back to the Buzzsprout conversation, he said Buzzsprout's free tier brings in younger broker podcasters, and Spotify also serves that audience. Let me give you my quick thoughts on Buzzsprout, because I don't think I have on the show before. The content is counted in terms of hours instead of file size, which is different from a lot of long-term podcast media hosts out there. It's not necessarily bad. It's just different. I don't like to think of my audio in those terms. I did it with Spreaker and I didn't like it. So that's just a like versus dislike thing. And I think it's personal. But I will say that it re-encodes, Buzzsprout anyway, re-encodes audio to 96 kilobits per second mono. If you come in above that, unless you pay for other options like their Magic Mastering, which depending on what plan you use is between $6 and $12 additional per month. Like I said, it depends on your plan of how much audio you plan on loading up. I did look into the bandwidth limitation that Buzzsprout has. It used to be 250 gigabytes. They have upped that to 500 gigabytes per month at the lower level plans. And if you bust that, they will put you into the professional level plans, which is a lot more money. We don't talk about that on this show, but we like to keep things at the hobby level. I'll tell you, different media hosts do it different ways, and they all do it. They will, if you're using enough bandwidth, they will bump you up, but you don't hear about it too much with some of the other longer serving podcast media hosts. But this is Buzzsprout putting a line in the sand, and you can check that out at their terms of service on their website. So based on that, it's not my preferred podcast media host. It's why I don't talk about it on the show all that much, but I recognize that they're a big factor in podcasting with 80,000 podcasts on it.
Following back to your question you asked about Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals, Jason Bryant in our chat said he got a small clamp for his webcam. That's it. Don't have in-studio guests right now, so no reason to buy gear. Oh, so true, hey?
Yep. So Betsy, follow on to our first question of the episode. She asked, does it count that I finally got a domain name that will work for my podcast for the first year at a discount? I bought some really bad ones several months ago that I will let lapse, and I bought a pop filter for the mic. Nothing else, sadly. So yeah, I will count that. You bought a domain name. We were just talking about that, if that was a deal. And Steven talks about this all the time, getting either web hosting services or URL domain names on the cheap on Black Friday is always a benefit. If you can get into that cycle of updating it every Black Friday, then you're going to be better off for it. So, yep, I would consider that to be good to go.
So I want to mention, you go ahead.
Well, just finished the pop filter. We talked about that the last time she was asking questions. I'm glad she got one.
For sure. One thing I wanted to mention, this came up on the 21st of November. I was looking at a YouTube comment that came up, and I'll admit what I do here. So I've done a couple of videos on YouTube for the Zoom L12 where I've done walkthroughs. I did my initial one, and then after a year of use, I did a year follow-up, and I walk through a bunch of different features, and apparently people like it because I get overall quite a bit of positive feedback and views on those videos. Well, there's a lot of comments on there, and I will admit that I don't respond to everyone, even though I see a lot of them, because at some point, unfortunately, I have to move on with my stuff, and and sometimes I have to spend other time elsewhere. And I appreciate the views and I appreciate the subscriptions, but as a hobby podcaster, I don't always have time to go in and comment on every single one, but I do often read them, and sometimes I'll go and respond and then respond to some of the most recent ones. And sometimes I don't know the answer to the question, so because they might be asking music related, and so I don't know that. And I kind of hope if I leave it open, someone else might come in and answer that, and that does happen on occasional, and so it pays off there. Well, someone commented that one of the complaints that I had early on about the L12 was now solved. And this is something that if you want to go to betterpodcasting.com, you can find, I wrote a little article on there. If you want the short URL for it, and by short, it's a little long. It's geeks.link/Zoom L12 USB update. And I'll have that in the show notes over at betterpodcasting.com if you want to check that out. And I walked through the new features that are added on, the feature that was added on there. And what it is the L12, the way it was designed, is the USB from the board into the computer was channels 1 and 2. So essentially, if you wanted to have a stereo device pull that in, you ended up only getting channels 1 and 2 because it was only taking as the left channel 1 and as the right channel 2. And this is a problem because if you wanted to be recording the whole mix of your mixer, like how we do here, where we want to take that and stream that out or record it as a backup or whatever, those ended up at the end of the tail on tracks 13 and 14. So it didn't work with stereo applications. You could get multi-track, all 14 fine, but with a stereo application, you couldn't get that without some form of other workaround. So like for me, the easiest workaround I have was I got a UMC 202 HD, and it's not my main recording source, so I just went from the main output into that, and I was off to the races. Well, in the L8, they actually fixed this. So obviously they saw that it was a problem. I actually emailed them early on to see if there was a way to work around that, and they said no. And the L8, they made a change so that was fixed. Well, apparently in September, they updated the driver software. And if you look at the log, there's 2 entries in the history. There's like the first version and then version 2 point something, which was like a significant number jump. There's no other indications in the log of what was changed. And they added the ability that you could go and change that USB input so that tracks 1 and 2 are the stereo mix, which is great because that is a problem that a lot of people face. I know we've had people comment on that YouTube video, but in our Discord and email over the years. For me, I eventually, I'm using the L8 right now, and anyways, that's a whole other conversation about not getting content out on it, but I want to get back to the L12. It's a lot bigger, but I just like it a little bit better having the extra inputs. Occasionally I want to hook up an extra mic or whatever, and I've got the L8 full. When I do that, I can probably, from my workflow, remove the UMC 202 HD. So,
yeah, that actually opens it up for a possibility for me. So if I absolutely had to buy something right now, I would buy the L12 because I could make it work. It's not my preferred thing, even with that, but yeah, I can make it work right there. Also, I want to talk about one question that was in our Discord, which you can find at betterpodcasting.com/Discord. Damien asks, Stargate Pioneer, some friends are talking mics. What microphones? What is the Electro Voice model you prefer, as well as what is the Sony mic you have talked about liking as well? First of all, I'm using the Electro Voice RE320. It is not a microphone for everybody. It's not a microphone for Steven. He's tried it before. I don't like his voice on it, but I like my voice on it. So it's very good. I know the Electro Voice RE20, which is more expensive, is considered by many to be a number one microphone right next, dynamic cardioid microphone right next to the Shure SM7B, which I don't like. I won't go into that right now, but I have always thought that eventually I would try an RE20 and go from there. But the RE320 has been working great for me. As for the Sony microphone, I actually don't like any Sony microphone that I know of. What he was referring to when we discovered this in the chat was the Sennheiser MD46, and that is the microphone that I was talking about. So, hey, if you want to ask us any questions outside of our live stream, you can come to our Discord at betterpodcasting.com/Discord. Either us or some of the other very knowledgeable folks that are there can answer the questions.
So thanks everybody for checking out our live chat this week. Before we go, I'll give one shout out. Liberty Dude did make, actually, I think he was the biggest podcast gear purchase out of our chat room and us right now. Yeah. He bought an RE20, he said.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What I was talking about.
Which he said that he already owned a used RE20. So what he's looking forward to is a little comparison of new versus used of the RE20 to see if there's a difference in the sound. So I told him, get in touch with us if you're willing to share a comparison. I'd love to hear it.
Well, I know the RE20s from the 80s are considered superior microphones just because of the different hardware that they use to make them on the inside, but I like the new ones anyway. Oh, and yeah, I would agree that he won, but Jason Bryant bought a couple of pairs of Air Jordans, which I'm sure he uses when he's podcasting to get out of the way of all those wrestlers, which are trying to bring him to the mat.
If you do have any questions for us that you want us to answer in a future episode, please come to our Discord server. It's betterpodcasting.com/Discord, or better yet, come on by our live chat room when we do record either this or the Better Podcasting main show, because when we're recording that main show, there is stuff that we talk about. We just kind of talk a little bit after the show. It goes nowhere. It's just there for those who are watching us live, and you can always ask us questions then. That's 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays. And keep your eyes on betterpodcasting.com/events, because the schedule will be updated shortly for what December is going to look like, because we'll be taking a couple of weeks off, even though there'll be a little shuffle in this schedule, and maybe an extra episode on the Better Podcasting main show. So check that out if you want on the recording sessions on betterpodcasting.com/events. Thanks, everybody, and we hope that you come back to our next live recording, but also check out the great content over on GonnaGeek.com. So for episode 230, no, it's not. Wow. For episode 22 of Better Podcasting Live Chat, I'm Stephen John Drew saying, SP, neither of us bought podcasting gear on Black Friday. Are we even able to keep hosting Better Podcasting?
Yes, because we're talking about being good with our money. We'll see everybody next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen John Drew of Gonna Geek Productions. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.
All right, so here's the deal with the shelf. Okay, there's a couple factors at play. Number one, let me stand up for a minute. Let me stand up. And this is an old chair. You might not be able to tell. There's a slight chance that my camera might be slightly off angle because Zoom makes it. It's a little microphone to camera thread adapter. And I've since, here we go. I've since 3D printed some. So it looks like this, right? So that's what it looks like, right? So because it's on a mic stand, there's a chance that could tilt. But here's the thing, and it's probably gotten more prominent over the years, especially since last year, and I'll explain more in a second on that. It's actually on an angle backwards. So this corner, there's more space between my chair and this corner than there is here. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, if I put it flat, you see that, okay? So that's one. And it's tipping backwards. And the second reason for that is because what was the reason? Oh, the second reason why it's probably gotten more prominent is because when I got my chair mat, my most recent chair mat, I went bigger because the old one I used to have would roll over the place. Like or I would roll off it all the time. And with this chair mat, because it's longer, my backdrop's on wheels and not very large wheels. So it's, if I put it back, it kind of tilts a little bit. And that's just because of the way the chair mat sits with the carpet and things like that. And it just, I need to pull it forward. And then actually I have two cases of two Wii games that I tuck under it to make sure that it doesn't fall back, like just as a safeguard. That's what I do right now. And it was fine, like because the chair mat was shorter before, it was on the carpet and it was very, very stable. But when it's on the chair mat now, it's not. So the angling and bringing it closer to where I am, because it's not on the edge, it's more stable than on the edge of the chair mat. So it's probably more angled now, and that's probably the optical illusion. That's why you see probably more of this side than you used to. So
in all fairness, Steven would have a different backdrop this year, but he decided to spend that time building a shed so he could lock his boys away when they're bad. So he wanted to do that versus the new backdrop this year.
No, and then the other thing,
no, and that's it. No other refute.
No,
just no.
No. The other thing is slanted upwards. No, this is not. It's even, if anything, it's tilting backwards, but I don't like my chin. I don't like my chin, so my camera is angled higher and downwards. So that's
crap.
what it is.
Nobody likes their chin.
So
just get over it.
That's what it is. So it's
you're vain. You're vain.
It is, and I'll admit it. And it's a technique that people use. So because of that, you're seeing more of this shelf, and it's giving a false look because it's looking down, like it's slightly angled down. This is actually, if I was to put a level on it, let me see. Do I have anything around? Hold on.
You know, if I could not see another scene of my daughters doing this with their phone, doing this with their phones. So, you know, it's above them so that they can hide anything down. If I could just not see that anymore, I'd be fine. Just hold it out normally. Don't hold it up to the ceiling. Just hold it out normally.
No, I don't.
Are too vain.
I don't have my level. I don't have a ball. Oh, wait, hold on. I might have a ball.
Betsy, do you need therapy? You've listened to at least 100 BP episodes. I mean, that's 100 Stevens. I'm sorry.
I don't know if you can tell, but you see? Oh, hold on. That one stay put.
Yeah, but you dented that on one side so it doesn't roll. Okay.
Actually, that side's more stable, but you can see it's rolling, right? So
your whole island is moving. So you live on the Pacific rim of fire, whatever they call that.
See? So it's actually tilted backwards right now. But no, it's level to itself, right? But the whole thing's tilted backwards, and it's almost an optical illusion because of the camera. So I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Every time you move that thing, I cringe.
The left side is
microphone
lower.
Movies.
Left side is lower. One second.
Every time if you could still hear me, I worry every time that you move that thing, those microphones jiggle, and I worry about them falling off.
Oh, probably.
I guess I shouldn't worry about the Rusto mic because I don't think anything can happen to that anymore, and probably not the SM58 that you got up there. You notice your numbers skyrocket. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. We actually know where you live based on the fact that you've listened to so many podcasts from your house. So, Betsy, not to get creepy or not, but that's how good podcast analytics can get. Oh.
All right, 1 sec. Hold on. Let's find out. Is this one too big?
Man, there's two things
too big
that can get Steven going. One is camera lighting, and the other is his backdrop. And you just hit the trifecta.
All right. You can't see it. Hold on.
No, nobody can see that.
Can I? No, I can't. Hold on. Let me do that.
Take a picture.
I'm going to. Yeah, it's, I guess, slightly. No, I guess it's slightly lower. Like.
The lower shelf. He's saying the lower shelf, not the upper shelf. Riveting audio, I know, but we're post show. Everybody's just watching Steven take a picture of his level.
Hold on. It's not turning out. 1 sec.
Oh, your Pixel isn't taking a good picture. I know my iPhone 12 Pro Max would take a great
I
picture.
had the flash on. Okay, because I had it force flash. Okay. Hold on. Now I got to get it uploaded and downloaded. And just hold on.
Probably have a drone over your house. Betsy, you have no idea how many drones I have flying around.
All right. Let's get this downloaded. Come on. There we go. Okay. It is slightly off, but like.
Hey, Liberty, I don't think you're crazy, but I think there's an optical illusion going on there because of its angle in relation to the frame.
Let's see here.
And also, I'm not sure if there could be a fisheye effect in the Logitech camera.
And the reason it is slightly down is because of the chair mat situation I mentioned. So it's not drastic, right? Like,
as we would call that in Minnesota, that's good enough.
So,
of course, we don't live on the rim of fire, so we don't have to worry about our houses collapsing due to an earthquake. About the biggest thing that we got to worry about is the Yellowstone super volcano, and when that goes, it doesn't matter if your house is level or not.
So anyways, thanks for asking that. That was a good question, but I do got to go. You got me going though, for sure. You got me going.
You did. You know how to push his buttons, Liberty. There's a few people that can push Steven's buttons, and you're one of them.
But I've mentioned it before. At some point I got to replace this backdrop. Like I have a standing acknowledgement from my wife if I can if I can make it more condensed and not have this off to the side. I got approval to make the purchase.
Yeah, you said no before, and I just want to point out that that is true. You would have done a new backdrop this year if it hadn't been for the shed build.
I would. I've had a few ideas for a little while, and you know what? Now that I got the saw, it'll be even easier to do it, right? So
I see you built the shed to get the tools so you can make a better backdrop.
If I was like, honey, I really need to build a new backdrop. Can I get a new saw? It'll make it easier. Be like, no, but it's like, look, I am gonna build this a shed. Can I get a saw? That was the workaround. Lots of
no. I'm gonna build us a shed so we can lock the boys in when they're being bad. Can I get the tools to do that? And she said, oh, absolutely. Why didn't you come up with this idea earlier?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Thanks, everybody, and have yourself a wonderful rest of your night. Thursday, there will be a new Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. at what time?
We're moving it up at 7 p.m. Eastern now.
Awesome. That's good for you guys, because I know it was a little late for you Easterners.